Hi, I'm Christy Blatchford, courts columnist and big mouth for the National Post. The case of Vice Admiral, I keep saying Vice Admirable, which is a nice malapropism, Vice Admiral Mark Norman resumes in Ottawa later this month. And it's a really interesting case, which has got a whole lot of attention for very good reasons, especially when you consider this isn't the trial of Mark Norman. This is merely a third-party records application. In other words, it's a motion brought by the defense to force the government to hand over documents that the defense believes are relevant and will help them in their defense of their client. Norman is the former number 2 guy in the Canadian Forces who is charged with a single count of breach of trust for allegedly leaking confidential information about a shipbuilding project to an acquaintance at the shipbuilding company and to a CBC reporter. This is the only amusing small part of the story because Ottawa, after all, is a city where absolutely everything, even a good morning, is transactional and where information is the currency that everyone uses. The very idea that somebody, especially somebody as honorable a character as Mark Norman, could be charged for leaking secrets in a city where everybody leaks secrets is ironic. Anyway, the more serious part of it, though, is the muscle of the state. Now, the state, the government, always has the balance of power in any prosecution, whether it's for, murder or drunk driving or whatever. The police and the prosecution collect and assemble the evidence. They control what is evidence. And it's the duty of the Crown, in other words, in this case, the Federal Prosecution Service and the Department of Justice. They each have 3 lawyers in court. But they are the government, they are the state and the Crown. And it's the duty of the Crown to disclose all relevant evidence, not just the stuff that's helpful to the prosecution. This is because traditionally the Crown, whatever form it takes, the government, always has sort of 2 hats, is always wearing 2 hats. First of all, it prosecutes, but it also has what's called in the courts a duty to the administration of justice. What that really means is they have a duty to the truth-seeking function of the courts. Because they have this special access to the documents and evidence in the case, they have a duty to a higher pursuit than just a prosecution. If there's evidence in there that is damaging to their prosecution, they are supposed to disclose it to the defense. If there's evidence they stumble across which is important and perhaps neither helpful to one side or the other, but it's relevant, they still have to disclose it. And in the case of Mark Norman, the state's power is even greater than it normally is. In this case, the state is the complainant. It was the Prime Minister's office, which is the bureaucracy attached to Prime Minister Trudeau's office, which called in the RCMP to investigate the matter criminally. It is the state through the police, the RCMP, and the prosecution which prosecutes the case. And in this case, it's the state which controls all the information. It's the Prime Minister's office, the PMO, which decides what documents should be confidential, which ones are going to be released, and when, etc. And that's the really, to me anyway, the really troubling part of this prosecution has been the collective conduct of the Crown. The Crown has been shuffling its feet. Every single request the defense has had to make for documents, for relevant information, has taken them 3 or 4 or 5 letters to even emails to get a response. The response is often, we don't know, we haven't decided, or we're still looking at it. It's really quite troubling because how on earth can anyone have a fair trial if you don't know what the evidence is against you? And the reason you don't know that is because the state controls the information and won't tell you. Anyway, when this case resumes January 29th in Ottawa, again, we will find out more of, I expect anyway, more of the defense travails in trying to get to the documents they need. But this time, it's the judge, and she's a real tough cookie, a really good judge, I think, and she seems a lot more curious about the truth in this case than the Crown does collectively.